Hi, everybody. Mrs. File here. We're going to be doing the Daily Me, reading the Daily Me article as the Think Aloud. So let me share my screen here. Here we go. Or maybe, aha, now we're sharing. Okay, so as you know, as I am reading this, I'm going to be doing things like identifying main idea, using the checklist that you also have in your hot little hands here. Okay, so the Daily Me by Nicholas Kristof, New York Times, March 19th. Okay, paragraph 1. Some of the obituaries these days aren't in the newspapers, but are for newspapers. The Seattle Post-Intelligencer was the latest to pass away, save for a remnant that will only exist in cyberspace. And the public is increasingly seeking its news, not from mainstream television networks or ink on dead trees, but from grazing online. So the idea here is that newspapers are basically going away. They can't keep up circulation anymore. So that's why we're having obituaries for them. Let's see, I would say that this is basically the truth. And here we go with that we're not using mainstream television or radio stations anymore. We are actually using social media and other apps from where we get our news. Okay, so back to paragraph 2. When we go online, each of us is our own editor, our own gatekeeper. We select the kind of news and opinions that we most care about. And this is true. I think this is true even when you're watching mainstream news, what you can still find of it. That we tend to listen more or pay attention more to who is the stories that we're interested in. However, now that the news anymore is not like this lost leader for a TV station, and it was how they acted in the public interest by giving as accurate story as they could. There are actual facts that are undisputed. An apple is an apple. A banana looks entirely different and is not an apple. Those are things that we can agree with because they are facts, and our feelings about facts don't change them. They are still facts. However, we change what we think about them. And considering that already with the 24-hour news cycle and TV stations like CNN and MSNBC and I'll pick on Fox for right now, we already have packaged news that is packaged and given to you by what we call a pundit. And a pundit is a person who has a political agenda. In newspapers back of old, they would mark the page that was the editorial or the op-ed page, and it would reflect not necessarily the writer's opinion, but the opinion of the editors. It's the editorial page. So the opinion editorial. Now we be that editor. We can decide that we don't want to hear news about certain areas of the world. We don't want to hear news about politics. We just want to hear news about bunnies. And we can do that because we are our own gatekeeper. And therefore we literally don't even have to see or look at news now that we don't care about. Okay, paragraph 3. Nicholas Negroponte of MIT has called this emergency news product the Daily Me. And if that's a trend, God save us from ourselves. Okay, so the Daily Me, the news that we decide that we want to hear, which sounds like it shouldn't be that big of a problem. But when you really think about it, especially as you look at the polarization in our country right now, where people on the left, Democratic, liberal, whatever you want to call them, and people on the right, conservative, Republican, grand old party, right wingers, whatever you want labels, let's try to avoid labels. all of these companies are pushing their own interest and are trying to pull a very particular listener, viewer to their material. And they do that by already packaging it with the editorial and then stating that it is fact. And that's a very scary thing, because if we cannot obviously tell what is the difference between fact and not fact, then we start to run into a whole bunch of different things because we don't know what the facts are. And if we can't find the actual facts, you can start falling down this snowball of facts are just your feelings about facts. It's not how many people that showed up or didn't show up. It's just, I felt like it was a large crowd. Okay. Sorry, I need to pause for a second. Okay, sorry about that, but I'm in my classroom, class is actually going on. I already look weird for the people who are sitting here because I'm sitting here talking to myself and recording myself. But the people who are walking by the window that was open are even more, finding me even more strange. Okay. Okay, number 4, paragraph number 4. That's because there's pretty good evidence that we generally don't want good information, but rather information that confirms our own prejudices. We may believe intellectually, so in our minds, in this clash of opinions and discussion and discourse, but in practice, we like to embed or situate ourselves in a reassuring womb of an echo chamber where we just hear our opinions bounced back off to ourselves. Because face it, if you hear exactly what you believe, you get to have it packaged for you and presented for you. And then you don't have to think because, gosh, it's such a waste of time to use the brain for thinking or something. So we like that. We like that feeling because if it's being presented the way we think about it, then we feel smart. We feel like, oh yeah, we knew this. Of course, there aren't really facts. They're just, mystery things that, it's my feelings. It's not your feelings, I'm sorry. Okay, so we like to be in that echo chamber. So one classic study, this is paragraph 5, sent mailings to Republicans and Democrats, offering them various kinds of political research, ostensibly, this was the story they used, from a neutral source. Both groups were really eager to receive intelligent arguments that strongly corroborated or agreed with their pre-existing views. Isn't that amazing? We want to hear stuff that tells us that we're right because we want to feel good about our decisions, even if we haven't put thought into our own decisions. Okay. Paragraph 6, there was also modest interest in receiving manifestly silly arguments for the other party's views. We feel good when we can caricature the other guy's dunces. But there was very little interest in encountering solid arguments that might undermine one's own position. Now, once again, an argument is simply a statement of claim, not which is what we've sort of turned into in our world today. And what we really need to get away from, in my opinion, is that we need to start opening our ears more and closing our mouths more, closing our mouths more and opening our ears more. And that's the doorbell that we get to listen because someone's very impatient at the gate. So we wanted to get things that agreed with ourselves and our own pre-existing views. And we want things that make the other people look like idiots because then we feel better because we're smarter than they are. But we didn't really want anything that was going to make us question what we've already decided is the truth. And that's the scary part, because if you weren't there at the event, at the happening, at the whatever it was that took place, then you don't really know facts. If you are just watching video clips on a TV show or on a social media site, you are only seeing what somebody wants you to see. When I worked in radio, it was a very big deal that we were not allowed to have our guests that we were interviewing for the news sound like an idiot. So if you had a person who was or well, that sort of thing, we would have to edit all of that stuff out so he would sound like a coherent, trustworthy person. Part of this was to make sure that that person, if they were a good person for this kind of information, that they'd be willing to come back because they don't get embarrassed by what they sounded like. And two, it makes him sound much more credible or trustworthy if he seems to be coherently speaking without these, constant verbal pauses and things. So we have to begin to understand that we need to search out our own facts. And the first part of doing that is turning off for-profit media, turning off media that's coming at you from social media that's using all those algorithms to figure out what is going to make you engage. So they're going to show you stuff that you hate because hate engages better than like, and they're going to show you things that you like. And that means that you're going to be faced with stuff that is making you both happy and angry. And that dichotomy of we don't get anything in between, because life is not black and white, happy, sad. It's annoying and frustrating and interesting and all those shades of gray. All right, paragraph 7. The general finding has been replicated repeatedly. In other words, they've done this over and over and it keeps coming back the same. As the essayist and author Farhad Manhood noted in his terrific book last year, true enough, learning to live in a post-fact society. Okay, that's scary, learning to live in a post-fact society, because every society should be based on fact. You notice that I'm saying fact and not truth, because you always filter truth through yourselves and your filters of how you're feeling today, how the family you were raised in, the culture you were raised in, and everything else. It's very difficult to have an objective or empirical scientific truth, but you can definitely have scientific fact. So, and if we're in a post-fact society, what I believe happened is more important than what actually happened. That's the direction we're moving in, and that's something that we need to keep in mind because it's not a good place to be. Okay, number 8, here's from the author. Let me get one thing out of the way. I'm sometimes guilty myself of selective truth-seeking on the web. The blog I turn to for insight into Middle East news is often Professor Juan Coles because he's smart, well-informed, and sensible. In other words, I often agree with his take. I'm less likely to pursue the blog of Daniel Pipes, another Middle East expert who is smart and well-informed, but who strikes me as less sensible, partly because I often disagree with him. And we will do that. As human beings, we like to feel coddled and comfortable. But just being aware of the fact that you are doing this, and I'll freely admit this, I watch Bill Maher's Real Time. I watched Last Week Tonight with John Oliver. They're both relatively liberal stuff. However, they tend to present more fact than discussion. And that catches me because oftentimes they touch on things that I don't really think about. And then I'm sitting here going, whoa. And that's what you should feel like when you are watching or consuming news. It should make you think. It should make you go, wow, I didn't realize that was where a lot of the stuff was coming from. All right. So, but just be aware that you're going to choose this sometimes, and it's okay to choose this sometimes. But if it's important and people are arguing about it, it's time for you to go and find your own facts. Find out what actually happened. Okay. The effect of the daily me would be to insulate us further in our own hermetically sealed political chambers. And back to that echo chamber where I believe this and everybody and everything I hear believe is telling me that I'm right. So you don't want to go out there because someone's going to tell you you're wrong. This is so much easier. But life's not meant to be easy. It's meant to be lived and interesting. So we have to step out of that chamber. One, one of last year's more fascinating books was Bill's Bishop's The Big Sort: Why Clustering of Like-Minded America is Tearing Us Apart. He argues that Americans increasingly are segregating themselves into communities, clubs, and churches where they are surrounded by people who think the way they do. And this is happening to such a degree that employers are begging schools to prepare their students to be able to, one, get along with people, and two, be able to work with people who are not like themselves. Because even if you can isolate in a suburb or a community or a part of the community and go to that church and just be around these people who all think like you do, eventually you have to go to that place of work where you may be dealing with the general public who does not believe what you think is correct. So people are getting into these smaller and smaller groups that are constantly reliving the same idea. Almost half of Americans now live in countries that vote for live in counties, that vote in landslides, either for Democrats or for Republicans. In the 1960s and 70s, in similarly competitive national elections, only about 1/3 of people lived in those landslide counties. So people really are moving not just to live necessarily with their own race or ethnicity. Now it's spending more time with the people who believe the way I believe. Some of that still falls through racial and ethnic and socioeconomic lines, but people are choosing to do this more and more. So the nation's grown more politically segregated, and the benefit that ought to come with having a variety of opinions is lost to this righteousness of a special entitlement of homogeneous groups. So where we should be thinking and talking and debating, and all those things can happen, the big deal is you need to stop talking as much and listen more, because that's what makes you challenge your thoughts. If you always believe the same thing and you're not open to change, you are just through life. I mean, you need to kind of have your reality check from time to time. And I mean, I will freely admit, here's my personal anecdote just to add in here. I often will have something happen and have no reason, no understanding really why it happened so badly. And I go to someone that I care about and go, hey, this is what happened. Can you try to explain why this happened to me? And either they will agree that the other person acted strangely, or maybe I was the one that screwed up. Okay, so we need to get out of these homogeneous, homo means the same, genius, thought, same thought groups. We need to get out of these same thought groups. Okay. One 12-nation study found that Americans were the least likely to discuss politics with people of different views. And this was particularly true of the well-educated. High school dropouts had the most diverse group of discussion mates, while college graduates managed to shelter themselves from uncomfortable perspectives. Once again, here you go. People who earn more money can choose much more closely where they want to live and what groups they want to hang out with. And this, again, makes it that homogeneous group, right? Even though you would think that the well-educated will have been more exposed to these greater ideas or different ideas. And it kind of depends on where you hung out in college. If you're hanging out in the engineering, math, science groups, you're probably not hearing a whole lot of political discourse. Whereas if you are more in the humanities area of social studies and arts and philosophy and stuff, you will be confronted more by it, because these people are interested in discussing and debating and arguing. And arguing doesn't have to be a bad thing. Arguing is having a spirited debate without hating the other person or wanting to pull a gun or something. We want to avoid that. So the result is polarization and intolerance. Okay, I think we can all agree that in our country today, this is where we are at. And we're having people rioting in the streets for either in the cause of Black lives or against Black lives, or people don't speak to one another. We now have 46% of people believe that a civil war is going to be necessary. This isn't a North and South thing. This means that, we all live sort of together and next to the people who disagree with us. So how would that even look? And why on earth do we need to kill people for disagreeing with us? This is supposed to be the great melting pot, and we're open for the ideas of all, and we can question even our government. The whole First Amendment right to speak. Everybody has the right to speak. No one has the right to express, to promote hate or violence. And I think the biggest deal here is the fact that we're not willing to listen to anybody else. I can listen to people who do not agree with me politically. And depending on how well I feel about this person, or if I want to push their buttons, I can listen and I can agree to disagree. And I need to pause. Yep. Okay, takes a while to get to the pause thing. So that was another student walking in. Okay, so polarization, bad thing. Being able to listen to someone who doesn't agree with us, it doesn't harm us to listen to somebody. No one said that you have to, sing kumbaya and all grow up and agree together. We can always leave still with our own beliefs, but I think it makes us more empathetic to understand why someone, and that's what I want to know. I want to know why someone believes what they believed. I will share one political thing with, there's another teacher here who was a big supporter of Trump. And she was very upset that people were speaking out against him because she viewed that as attacking the office of the President of the United States. And being raised in the military, I can understand that point. And she's like, well, why do you handle it? And I said, my problem with him is that he disrespects the office of the president. And if the person who holds it isn't respecting the office, I think the rest of us don't need to respect the office at that point either. So, but I can understand, I understand she was very upset that people were sort of dismissive of her and her beliefs, and just listening and ask the question, okay, so why do you believe that way? And usually you can get some common ground there as to why they have gone to this odd way of thinking, or seeming to you odd way of thinking, and tell them why you believe what you believe. And if you can't explain why you believe what you believe, it's time to do some more thinking about what you think. All right. Now this is scary. Still in number 13. Cass Sunstein, a Harvard professor now working for President Obama, this was 10 years ago, has conducted research showing that when liberals or conservatives discuss issues such as affirmative action, a liberal issue, or climate change, a issue with, their views become quickly more homogeneous, more same thinking, and more extreme than before the discussion. For example, some liberals in one study initially worried that action on climate change might hurt the poor because they can't afford new cars that are electric and all this other, upgrading their house to include, solar panels and solar batteries and things like that. But after these discussions, the liberals not only agreed more, but they had become more extreme. They had moved beyond caring about the impact on the poor and just became more, we must fix the climate, which I agree with. We need to fix the climate if we are planning on living here for any length of time. And it needs to be done now. All right, so more personal anecdotes, more reading it. And so far the author's reasoning with me I've agreed with it. So, hey, here it is. I'm agreeing with these facts. Okay, the decline of the traditional news media will accelerate the rise of the daily me. And we'll be irritated less by what we read and find our wisdom confirmed more often. So we're not going to be irritated by reading stuff that doesn't interest us or doesn't chew against our thinking, doesn't attack our thinking. And we'll find ourselves to be much more bright because everything we're seeing agrees with who we are. So obviously we're extremely smart people. The danger here is that this self-selected news acts as a narcotic, okay? Just like drugs, just like, weed, lulling us into a self-confident stupor through which we perceive the world in blacks and whites rather than this usual mix of gray where nothing is truly all right or all wrong. It's usually somewhere in between. And if we continue to look through these glasses that we've put on that are telling us that everything, this is all right and these people are wrong and this is fact and that's not, blah, blah, and we never think about anything, we don't interact and we become more entrenched, more circled down into our tribe, let's say, into our tribe or our team, and our team is everything. And then we stop speaking to one another, and then we become more and more and more polarized. Okay, once again, remember, traditional news media is going away. These are the lost leaders. They didn't make a whole lot of money, but this was a public service. And in the public service, they gave you this news as close to factual as they could in their collection of what they could collect as facts. Now, and you've all grown up in this 24-hour news cycle, the existence of CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, and now there's even more littering but they're for-profit news. They're not that lost leader anymore. News is now their product and not their public service. So in order to keep advertisers, they have to basically show what the advertisers want to hear. They're going to show what will attract the audience that these advertisers believe are most likely to purchase their products. And wow, my screen just went away. Okay, so let's see if the screen will come back, or we can stop sharing and see if that helps. Okay, we stopped sharing. My screen is still black. So let's try sharing again nope, not going to allow me to share again quite yet. So let me, yes, that's very nice. It's telling me it's number 2. Okay, so let me pause the recording again until I get this fixed. So hang on. Okay, I'm back after figuring out what the heck happened to my screen. Okay, so they are literally so news sites that are for profit are literally working for their advertisers. So companies that want to sell you stuff, and they figure out who the best, most likely candidates are to buy this, and they break it up by gender and by socioeconomic class and by age. And then they want the media outlets to present news that skews to the general thinking of this group, okay? Mostly age. They really like adults 18 to 54 because they have the most spending money. But without that working in the public interest thing still there, and now it's all for profit, this is becoming more and more of a problem with our news. And really much easier to package it exactly and target it towards an audience that some advertiser wants to have on so that more people buy their stuff. So it's manipulation in the media and by advertisers. Okay, so episode should be episodes by this time. Paragraph 15. So what's the solution? Tax breaks for liberal who watch Bill O'Reilly, who's no longer on. Conservatives who watch Keith Olbermann, who's also no longer working for these people. Not until President Obama brings us universal health care because we can't risk the surge in heart attacks. So perhaps the only way forward is for each of us to struggle on our own to work out intellectually with sparring partners whose views that we deplore. So in other words, we want to find people who have opinions that we hate. And we need to talk to them. And we need to view that as our mental workout. Because remember, you do need to work out your brain as much as you work out your body. So keep that in mind as you are going through this. For-profit media bad, especially for-profit media is bad, especially if news is the project or material that's being sold. Okay, so this is the end of the Think Aloud checklist and reading with Daily Me. Okay, and we'll come back soon to do the Daily Me is neither good nor bad.